The city of Naples in the late 18th century was a place of startling contrasts, a city where opulence and decay existed side by side, where golden palaces rose above narrow, winding streets filled with the cries of the impoverished. The aristocracy lived in a world that seemed almost unreal, surrounded by frescoed ceilings, marble statues, and gardens that stretched as far as the eye could see. Their lives were governed by etiquette, tradition, and the unyielding expectation that appearances were everything. A noblewoman's reputation was her currency, her honor a fragile shield that could be shattered by the slightest whisper of scandal. To outsiders, the city sparkled with charm and refinement, but behind the gilded doors of the palaces, there were shadows darker than the alleyways below. The streets outside were alive with merchants, beggars, and the occasional soldier patrolling for signs of unrest, but the noble quarters were a world apart. Here, the echoes of laughter from grand balls and masquerades mingled with the faint strains of harpsichords and violins. The air carried a scent of burning incense from churches and the subtle perfume of silk gowns and waxed hair. It was a life of privilege, but also of pressure, a constant performance where any hint of weakness or indiscretion could be exploited. For women of status, their movements, gestures, and even words were scrutinized. Marriage was not a matter of love, but of alliances, property, and strategic advantage. The rules were clear: obedience to the husband, fidelity, and above all, discretion. Yet, beneath the surface of velvet gloves and powdered wigs, human desire did not adhere to rules. It simmered, secretive, dangerous. Among the noble class, family honor dictated every action. Dowries were carefully calculated, marriages arranged with precision, and social gatherings functioned as stages upon which every member played a role. The nobility were expected to maintain an image of perfection, yet private indulgences often contradicted the public facade. It was not uncommon for affairs, both fleeting and prolonged, to occur behind closed doors, whispered about in the corridors of servants' quarters, or hinted at in private letters. The tension between public virtue and private vice created an undercurrent of anxiety, a precarious balance where a single slip could lead to ruin. For the noblewoman, every choice carried weight, and the consequences of failure were amplified by the relentless gaze of society. The architecture of the city itself mirrored this duality. Majestic palaces overlooked cramped, cobblestone streets, where merchants hawked their wares and children ran barefoot, their laughter mingling with the cries of vendors. The contrast between the glittering upper floors of the palaces and the shadowed alleyways below symbolized the divide between appearance and reality. Inside the palaces, the women moved like carefully poised chess pieces, attending salons, dinners, and performances, their every word measured, their expressions carefully crafted. The expectation of composure, elegance, and obedience was constant, yet behind closed doors, these same women navigated a different world, one of personal longing, desire, and sometimes rebellion. The city's rhythm, its festivals, religious observances, and political gatherings, reinforced the spectacle of perfection while masking the turbulence that churned beneath. In this world, secrets were a currency of their own. Servants observed, letters were intercepted, and whispers traveled faster than the official announcements from the court. The noblewoman's life was therefore a delicate dance, balancing personal satisfaction with the rigid demands of family and society. A clandestine meeting in a garden, a stolen glance across a crowded ballroom, a coded message hidden in the folds of a fan, all became small rebellions, acts that defied the invisible chains of decorum. Desire, unspoken yet undeniable, could bloom in the quietest corners, nurtured by the very restrictions meant to suppress it. The psychological tension was immense. Every interaction carried the potential for disaster, and the noblewoman lived in a constant state of heightened awareness, aware that one misstep could mean scandal, imprisonment, or even death. Political instability added another layer of uncertainty. Naples was a city where power shifted subtly but significantly. Nobles were entangled in alliances that required loyalty, discretion, and cunning. Marriages were negotiated like treaties, and personal grievances were often settled through subterfuge rather than confrontation. Within this intricate social web, the noblewoman's personal desires collided with societal expectations. Emotional fulfillment was rarely found in arranged marriages, and many sought solace in secret affairs. Yet the stakes were high. Discovery meant not only personal disgrace, but the potential ruin of one's family name. The fear of exposure created a climate of paranoia, secrecy, and tension that infiltrated every aspect of life, from the grand halls of palaces to the quiet chambers where intimate thoughts were whispered in the dark. The opulence of 18th-century Naples concealed the fragility of human ambition and desire. The noblewoman's world was a gilded cage, adorned with luxury, yet confining her to predetermined roles. Within this cage, forbidden passions could take root, nurtured by longing, isolation, and the knowledge that indulgence was dangerous yet irresistible. Society demanded perfection, but human nature resisted constraint. The tension between outward composure and inner desire became a fertile ground for scandal, betrayal, and, eventually, tragedy. The audience is drawn into this world, sensing both its beauty and its danger, understanding that behind every smile lies the potential for darkness. By establishing this setting, the stage is set for the tale of a noblewoman whose secret desires would ultimately lead to murder. The audience now understands the pressures of her world, the rigid expectations, the scrutiny, the perilous dance between public virtue and private vice. Naples, with its gilded halls and shadowed alleys, is not merely a backdrop but a character in itself, shaping choices, igniting passions, and amplifying consequences. The noblewoman's story begins here, in this world of contrasts, where elegance masks danger and desire can become deadly. The noblewoman at the heart of this story was born into privilege, her life predetermined by wealth, family alliances, and the strict codes of Neapolitan society. From the earliest years, she was trained to embody elegance, composure, and discretion. Tutors guided her in languages, music, and the fine arts, while older relatives drilled into her the importance of reputation and the inescapable chains of duty. Though the world outside her family's palaces was chaotic, impoverished, and often violent, she existed within the rarefied sphere of gilded corridors, marble floors, and frescoed ceilings. Every gesture, every smile, every word spoken in public had meaning, and mistakes could echo across the social landscape for decades. Yet despite this carefully constructed world, human longing could not be contained, and the noblewoman harbored a heart capable of desire, passion, and rebellion. Her marriage, arranged with calculated precision by her family, offered status and security, but little of the emotional connection she secretly craved. Her husband, a man of equal rank and wealth, was respected and politically useful but emotionally distant, preoccupied with his own ambitions and societal obligations. He saw his wife as a jewel of the family, a symbol of refinement and compliance, rather than as a person with private feelings. The noblewoman, confined by propriety and the suffocating expectations of her class, felt a growing emptiness in her life, a yearning for connection that could not be satisfied by wealth or status alone. In the quiet corners of her vast palace, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to be desired for her spirit rather than her social position. It was in this atmosphere of longing and restraint that her secret affair began. The lover she met was everything her husband was not: charismatic, attentive, and daringly independent. He represented a world forbidden to her, one of danger, spontaneity, and emotional fulfillment. Their initial encounters were fleeting and fraught with tension, each meeting charged with both exhilaration and the terrifying knowledge that discovery would destroy them both. Letters written in delicate hand, coded with subtle symbols and hidden phrases, became their lifeline, conveying passion, longing, and the secrecy necessary for survival. The noblewoman's intellect and charm allowed her to navigate these clandestine interactions skillfully, maintaining her social duties while orchestrating a hidden emotional life. The psychological strain of living this double existence was immense. By day, she moved through salons and grand gatherings with the poise expected of her rank, engaging in polite conversation, displaying grace, and never revealing the turmoil simmering beneath her composed exterior. By night, In the shadowed chambers of her private apartments or in secret meetings in dimly lit gardens, she surrendered to desire, allowing herself to feel joy, fear, and a dangerous sense of liberation. Every stolen moment carried risk. Every whispered word could be intercepted, every glance scrutinized. She became adept at reading the intentions of others, discerning who might suspect her and who could be trusted. This constant vigilance created a tension that permeated her every action, a delicate balance between satisfaction and the ever-present threat of ruin. Her internal world was a complex interplay of morality, longing, and defiance. The noblewoman understood the gravity of her transgression, yet she could not suppress the fire that burned within her. She grappled with guilt, fear, and the intoxicating pleasure of rebellion. Emotional depth emerged in the quiet solitude of her chambers, where she questioned her choices, contemplated consequences, and weighed her loyalty to family against her desire for autonomy. The contrast between her public virtue and private indulgence sharpened her awareness of the stakes. Every smile to a guest, every nod to a relative, every measured gesture in a crowded ballroom became a performance designed to shield her secret while sustaining the illusion of innocence. The affair also revealed the inherent dangers of her social environment. Naples' noble society thrived on gossip, observation, and the subtle wielding of influence. Servants could be loyal or treacherous, and rivals were constantly poised to exploit the smallest misstep. Even trusted confidants could become instruments of betrayal, whether through jealousy, fear, or coercion. The noblewoman had to navigate this treacherous landscape carefully, cultivating trust where possible, concealing passion where necessary, and always anticipating the consequences of exposure. The thrill of risk heightened her connection with her lover, each encounter intensified by the knowledge that discovery would be catastrophic. As the affair deepened, the noblewoman's private life became increasingly entangled with her public one. Decisions that once seemed simple now carried profound implications. A minor slip, a lingering gaze, a misplaced note, could ignite scandal. Yet the intensity of her desire and the depth of her connection with her lover made concealment almost unbearable. The audience witnesses not just the physical secrecy of the affair, but the emotional complexity that defines her existence. The tension between duty and passion, fear and desire, loyalty and self-fulfillment. This intricate psychological portrait creates suspense while allowing viewers to empathize with the impossibility of her situation. By the end of this section, the audience understands the profound isolation and longing that shaped the noblewoman's decisions. They see a woman bound by social expectation, yet driven by a private hunger that defies rules and propriety. Her secret is not simply an affair, but a rebellion against the rigid structures that confine her, a yearning for connection in a world designed to suppress it. This emotional and psychological foundation sets the stage for the escalating tension, paranoia, and danger that will define the next chapter of her story. The seeds of tragedy are planted here, as desire, secrecy, and societal constraints converge to create a volatile and compelling narrative. As the noblewoman's clandestine relationship continued, the stakes grew higher with each stolen moment. What had begun as a dangerous but thrilling diversion transformed into a consuming obsession that infiltrated every aspect of her life. The exhilaration of secret trysts, whispered promises, and the intoxicating touch of forbidden love could not be contained by the gilded walls of her palace. Yet with every secret rendezvous, the risk of exposure multiplied. Naples' tight-knit noble circles were riddled with gossip, and servants' eyes were always watching. Each encounter demanded intricate planning, coded letters, and careful timing, making the thrill of the affair inseparable from the gnawing anxiety that discovery might arrive at any moment. The lovers' meetings were charged with a mix of passion and fear, the two emotions intertwining to create a volatile intimacy. They met in shadowed corridors, under the soft glow of candlelight, or in secluded gardens where the night concealed their presence. Every whispered word, every fleeting touch, carried the weight of potential catastrophe. Their connection deepened, fueled not only by desire, but also by the adrenaline of secrecy. Each encounter strengthened their bond, yet it also sowed the seeds of paranoia. The noblewoman began to question who might suspect her, whose glance lingered too long, whose loyalty was uncertain. The psychological strain of living such a precarious double life became increasingly unbearable, sharpening both her cunning and her fear. The noblewoman's public interactions were now layered with subtle deception. She smiled and laughed at balls, conversed politely in salons, and attended social gatherings with perfect composure, all while her mind remained divided between her husband's presence and the lover who occupied her secret thoughts. Every word she spoke, every gesture she made, had to conceal the tempest of emotion raging within her. The need for appearances became almost a performance, a mask she wore to shield herself from suspicion. Servants, family members, and acquaintances were unwitting participants in her charade, each interaction demanding vigilance, foresight, and, at times, manipulation. The tension between public propriety and private desire was relentless, pushing her toward desperation. Rumors began to ripple through her social sphere, subtle and dangerous. Envious rivals or careless confidants could twist the smallest observation into scandal. The noblewoman noticed hints of scrutiny, a fleeting glance from a servant, a whispered question from a neighbor, a friend's sudden distance. Each instance became a trigger, heightening her sense of danger and intensifying her need for secrecy. Paranoia mingled with desire, creating an emotional cocktail that was impossible to resist, yet terrifying to confront. She became hyper-aware of every detail, from the placement of a letter to the timing of a rendezvous, and the lover, too, was acutely conscious of the risks. Their intimacy was now a delicate dance on a knife's edge, where passion and peril were inseparable companions. The lover's clandestine world was also marked by subtle power dynamics. The noblewoman wielded influence and cunning to maintain her secret, yet she was also vulnerable to manipulation and betrayal. Her lover, for his part, was both a source of exhilaration and a reminder of danger, a constant test of loyalty and discretion. Trust became the most valuable currency, and even minor lapses threatened to unravel their carefully constructed world. Each meeting carried an undercurrent of tension, each letter was scrutinized, and every conversation became a negotiation of risk. The intensity of their relationship heightened the psychological stakes, creating an emotional pressure cooker that would soon reach its breaking point. The noblewoman's isolation deepened as she became increasingly aware of the precariousness of her situation. Confidants were rare, and even among servants, loyalty was uncertain. She learned to read intentions, to interpret subtle shifts in demeanor, and to anticipate threats before they could materialize. The psychological toll was immense. She oscillated between exhilaration and fear, between longing and dread. Each moment of passion was shadowed by the specter of discovery, and the constant vigilance required to maintain secrecy began to dominate her life. Her emotional landscape became a labyrinth of desire, fear, and calculation, and the audience can sense the mounting tension with every passing day. The affair, now fully entangled in the fabric of her life, began to influence her decisions in ways both subtle and profound. Choices that once seemed trivial, what to wear, whom to greet, which letters to send, became loaded with consequence. Even her thoughts were colored by the need for secrecy and the intoxicating pull of forbidden love. The audience witnesses the psychological transformation. A woman once constrained by societal expectation, now navigating the dangerous terrain of desire and deception, constantly balancing pleasure against peril. The stakes of the story are no longer merely emotional. They have become existential. The fragile world she inhabits could crumble with a single misstep, a single revelation. By the end of this section, the tension has escalated to a nearly unbearable level. The noblewoman's double life is unsustainable, the paranoia consuming her, and the affair increasingly volatile. The audience understands the intensity of the forbidden connection, the intricate web of secrecy, and the looming threat that will drive her toward drastic actions. Passion, fear, and betrayal intertwine, setting the stage for the dramatic climax that will soon engulf her world. The story moves toward the inevitable collision of desire and consequence, with suspense mounting and every moment pregnant with danger. The foundation is laid for the tragic choices that will define her fate, and viewers are left teetering on the edge of anticipation, knowing that the calm of secrecy is about to shatter in a storm of violence and revelation. The inevitable moment arrived like a storm breaking in the night, sudden, violent, and impossible to ignore. The noblewoman, who had lived so long in the delicate tension between desire and fear, now stood on the precipice of a choice that would define her forever. Her lover, once the source of exhilaration and forbidden joy, had become entwined with danger, each encounter sharpening the edge of risk. Rumors had begun to spread, subtle but persistent, and the web of secrecy she had so carefully maintained threatened to unravel. Every whispered word, every glance, every servant's observation now carried the potential for catastrophe. It was in this crucible of tension and obsession that she made the fateful decision, one act of violence that would silence the affair forever. The night she chose was cloaked in darkness, the city asleep, the streets empty save for the occasional patrol or wandering night watchman. Her steps were measured and deliberate, each movement precise as if rehearsed countless times in her mind. The lover's residence, a modest apartment hidden in the labyrinthine alleys of Naples, lay ahead, and with it the culmination of all the fear, longing, and fury that had consumed her for months. She carried nothing more than her resolve, her heart hammering with the dual rhythm of terror and exhilaration. Every instinct screamed caution, yet an inexorable force propelled her forward. The audience feels the tension, the slow, deliberate pacing, each heartbeat a drumbeat of impending violence. Once inside, the atmosphere was charged with a mixture of familiarity and foreboding. The lover, unsuspecting and trusting, greeted her with warmth that would become his last memory. The contrast between the intimacy of the moment and the deadly intent that now filled the air intensified the drama, creating a tension that is almost unbearable. The noblewoman's mind raced, cataloging every possible outcome, weighing every risk, yet there was no turning back. The emotional weight of months of passion, secrecy, and fear culminated in this instant, where desire, jealousy, and desperation converged into a single, irrevocable act. The murder itself was swift, brutal, and calculated. There was no hesitation, no room for error, only the cold precision of a mind driven by obsession and fear. The audience is drawn into the scene, sensing the juxtaposition of beauty and horror, intimacy and violence. The lover's shock was immediate, the betrayal palpable in the stunned silence that followed. The noblewoman's actions were deliberate, each movement measured to ensure silence, each detail attended to with meticulous care. She had prepared for this moment not just physically, but psychologically, steeling herself against guilt, remorse, and the human instinct to hesitate. Her determination was absolute, born of a combination of desperation and the intoxicating thrill of control. The aftermath of the act was a labyrinth of fear, calculation, and concealment. The noblewoman worked swiftly to erase evidence, to ensure that no trace of her presence remained beyond the inevitable knowledge that the lover had vanished. The silence she imposed was both literal and metaphorical, a deliberate shroud to obscure her crime from the world. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, replacing items, closing doors, and wiping away any hint of struggle. The psychological tension remained, however, as every sound outside, every passing shadow, threatened to expose her. The audience is placed in her mind, experiencing the exhilaration of survival intertwined with the dread of discovery, every moment pregnant with suspense. Emotional complexity underscores this act. The noblewoman is not portrayed as a cold, unfeeling killer, but as a human being caught in an impossible situation, driven by fear, desire, and societal constraint. The audience is invited to navigate the moral ambiguity of her choices, to feel the rush of power, the sting of guilt, and the intoxicating sense of agency that comes from executing a plan so meticulously conceived. Her inner monologue, recreated through narrative description, exposes the contradictions in her mind: love and hate, longing and regret, triumph and terror. This duality heightens the drama, making the act both shocking and psychologically resonant. Word spreads slowly at first, whispers in the alleyways and rumors among servants. Yet the silence of the noblewoman's calculated act amplifies the tension. No one immediately suspects her, and this delay becomes both a source of relief and heightened suspense. The audience sees her navigate this precarious period, aware that at any moment, the fragile balance of secrecy could be destroyed. Every visitor, every servant, every knock at the door represents a threat, and the psychological pressure is relentless. This period immediately following the murder establishes the emotional and narrative tension that will carry the story into investigation, suspicion, and eventual confrontation with the consequences of her actions. By the conclusion of this section, the audience is left in a state of shock and suspense, having witnessed the transformation of desire into violence and secrecy into terror. The noblewoman has crossed a line from which there is no return, her fate now intertwined with the consequences of her choice. The scene leaves viewers grappling with the intensity of the act, the human psychology behind it, and the dark allure of forbidden passion that drives people to extremes. The story, now fully immersed in the horror of the murder, prepares the audience for the unraveling of secrets, the pursuit of justice, and the intricate web of fear, suspicion, and revelation that will follow. The murder that had unfolded in the shadows of Naples did not remain secret for long. Despite the noblewoman's meticulous efforts to erase evidence and mask her involvement, the disappearance of her lover set off a chain of inquiries that would soon envelop her world. Naples, a city alive with rumor and vigilance, quickly buzzed with speculation. Servants whispered in hallways, neighbors exchanged cautious glances, and the authorities began to take notice. The noblewoman, once the mistress of secrecy, now found herself trapped in a labyrinth of suspicion and investigation. Each day that passed intensified the psychological pressure, forcing her to confront the dangerous reality that even the most carefully concealed crime cannot remain hidden forever. The authorities' investigation was thorough and relentless, combining procedural diligence with the ever-present influence of social hierarchy. Detectives, magistrates, and guards followed leads, questioning servants, acquaintances, and anyone who might have seen or heard anything unusual. The noblewoman, outwardly composed, navigated these inquiries with careful calculation, aware that a single misstep could unravel her carefully maintained facade. She had learned to anticipate suspicion, to craft alibis, and to manage appearances, yet the relentless scrutiny of investigators created a tension that gnawed at her confidence. The audience is drawn into the slow, methodical uncovering of clues, each small detail adding layers of suspense and psychological complexity to the story. The courtroom became a stage where power, reputation, and human emotion collided. Trials in Naples' aristocratic society were as much about performance as they were about justice. Families vied to protect their own, witnesses sought influence or vengeance, and the public watched with a mixture of fascination and horror. The noblewoman's presence in court was a calculated display of dignity, a careful balance between vulnerability and control. Every gesture, every expression, every measured word was observed, analyzed, and potentially weaponized by those around her. The courtroom was no longer merely a place of law. It was a theater where social power, psychological warfare, and the pursuit of truth intertwined in complex and dramatic ways. Evidence played a pivotal role in escalating the suspense. Letters, rumored conversations, and testimonies from servants were scrutinized, each item a potential link between the noblewoman and the crime. The psychological tension heightened as the audience witnesses the uncertainty she faced. Witnesses who might recognize inconsistencies in her story, subtle cues that could betray her guilt, or chance discoveries that could overturn her careful plans. Her mastery of discretion was tested to its limits, and the fear of exposure became a constant companion. The trial sequences allow viewers to experience the suspense firsthand, the slow, deliberate process of investigation, creating a psychological mirror of her internal anxiety. Social pressure added another dimension to the drama. The noblewoman's family, conscious of the fragility of their reputation, exerted subtle influence, urging her to maintain composure and cooperate while simultaneously protecting their social standing. Allies and rivals alike weighed in, each interaction layered with threat, persuasion, or veiled warning. Even outside the courtroom, the public observed her with keen interest, eager for scandal, judgment, and drama. The constant scrutiny magnified every choice she made, turning even the simplest actions into a potential act of deception or confession. The audience experiences this relentless pressure, the sense that the noblewoman is constantly balancing survival against exposure, cunning against vulnerability. Psychological analysis deepens the intrigue. The noblewoman's intellect, charm, and emotional manipulation become tools not merely for seduction, but for survival. She navigates questioning with careful language, deflects suspicion with subtlety, and uses social perception to her advantage. Yet beneath this composed exterior, fear, guilt, and paranoia simmer, influencing her behavior in ways both conscious and unconscious. The audience is given insight into the human mind under extreme pressure, the strategies devised, the self-doubt endured, and the moral compromises made to navigate the perilous terrain of accusation and investigation. Her inner turmoil mirrors the suspense of the courtroom drama, each moment charged with potential revelation or disaster. The trial reaches moments of intense confrontation. Witnesses who had been silent for weeks suddenly recall small details. Servants' loyalty wavers under pressure. Cross-examinations probe the noblewoman's statements for contradictions. The tension is cinematic, the stakes enormous. One misstep could lead not only to personal ruin, but also to the destruction of her family's social standing. Each scene is constructed to maximize suspense and psychological depth, drawing the audience into the subtle maneuvers, whispered threats, and carefully calculated responses that define the aristocratic judicial process of Naples. Drama unfolds not just through the facts of the case, but through the interplay of human emotion, societal expectation, and the constant threat of exposure. By the end of this section, the audience is fully immersed in the high-stakes environment of investigation and courtroom drama. They understand both the procedural and emotional complexities of pursuing justice in 18th-century Naples, as well as the extraordinary cunning, fear, and resilience required of the noblewoman to navigate this treacherous path. Suspense remains high, the tension between secrecy and revelation unrelenting, and the audience is left anticipating the resolution, both of the trial and of the psychological and social consequences that will inevitably follow. The story teeters on the edge of judgment, poised to reveal the ultimate fates of all involved. The story of the noblewoman did not end with the courtroom, for the echoes of her actions reverberated far beyond the immediate circle of family, witnesses, and investigators. Naples itself seemed to hold its breath, as the scandal left an indelible mark on the social consciousness. The murder and subsequent trial became the subject of whispered conversations in salons, speculative gossip in public squares, and private warnings passed down through servants' quarters. Reputation, already a fragile construct in the world of the aristocracy, became both shield and target. Families recalibrated alliances, friendships shifted subtly, and the noblewoman herself became a figure of fascination, horror, and reluctant admiration. Even decades later, her story lingered in the annals of whispered history, a dark testament to desire, secrecy, and the perilous consequences of passion. The immediate aftermath of the trial saw the noblewoman retreating from public life, her movements constrained by both shame and prudence. Although she had survived legal scrutiny, the social repercussions were far more complex. Her family, while publicly maintaining a facade of control and dignity, had to navigate the fallout with delicacy. The scandal challenged assumptions about decorum, loyalty, and the perceived perfection of noble life. Conversations in salons shifted in tone, from polite pleasantries to cautious inquiries about rumors, and the noblewoman found herself forever marked by the intersection of love, violence, and social expectation. Her personal freedom was never the same, as every interaction carried the potential to reignite old gossip or spark new suspicion. The audience begins to grasp the enduring weight of her choices, extending beyond immediate survival into the domain of legacy and memory. The psychological impact of these events on the noblewoman was profound. Years of secrecy, passion, and fear had left emotional scars that could not easily be healed. Isolation, once chosen as a tool of self-preservation, now became a persistent reality. Moments of reflection brought both relief and torment. Relief at having survived exposure, torment at the irrevocable consequences of her actions. The audience witnesses the complexity of a human psyche wrestling with guilt, desire, and the drive to reconcile past deeds with a changing present. Her internal struggle mirrors the tension of the external world, a city and society fascinated by her story, yet simultaneously repelled by the darkness it revealed. The interplay between internal reckoning and external perception becomes central to understanding her enduring legacy. The Noblewoman's tale also highlights the fragility of historical memory. While official records documented the trial and outcomes in legal language, the nuances of her motivations, her secret suffering, and her passionate defiance were often omitted or sanitized. Letters and personal writings that might have revealed the depth of her inner life were lost, destroyed, or deliberately concealed. Consequently, history remembers the act, the murder, the scandal, the trial, more readily than the human being behind it. The audience is invited to consider how societal norms, class structures, and gender expectations shape not only behavior in life, but also the memory of it after death. Her legacy, therefore, is both concrete and elusive, documented yet shrouded in the shadows of secrecy she once so skillfully maintained. Despite the passage of time, the Noblewoman's story continues to evoke fascination, serving as both cautionary tale and darkly romantic legend. It exemplifies the tension between desire and constraint, between passion and propriety, illustrating how a single individual's choices can ripple across social, psychological, and historical dimensions. Scholars, writers, and storytellers have attempted to reconstruct her life from fragments, yet the full picture remains tantalizingly incomplete. Each attempt to understand her motivations, her fears, and her impulses adds depth to her narrative while simultaneously reminding the audience of the unknowable complexities of human behavior. The allure of forbidden passion, combined with the inevitability of consequences, ensures that her story retains a timeless, almost mythic quality. Furthermore, her actions challenge the rigid social codes of Naples, exposing the fragility of structures that claim to uphold morality, virtue, and honor. The scandal revealed that behind every polished exterior lay vulnerability, desire, and the capacity for transgression. The Noblewoman became a symbol of both human resilience and the danger of unchecked emotion. Her defiance of social norms, her meticulous concealment of secrets, and the eventual eruption of violence illustrate the tension between individual agency and societal expectation. For the audience, her life becomes a lens through which to examine broader historical realities, the roles of women, the constraints of aristocracy, and the intoxicating allure of forbidden acts. The narrative transcends the personal, offering insights into a society struggling to reconcile human nature with the rigid frameworks it had constructed. By the conclusion of this section, the audience is left with a haunting reflection on legacy, morality, and the enduring power of stories that straddle the line between history and legend. The Noblewoman's life, marked by secrecy, desire, and violent consequence, serves as a compelling reminder that human passion often defies expectation, and that societal structures, no matter how rigid, are never immune to disruption. Her story lingers not only in historical record but also in the imagination, a dark and poignant testament to the perils of forbidden love, the weight of secrecy, and the enduring fascination of human complexity. The audience is left to ponder the interplay of choice, consequence, and memory, understanding that some shadows, once cast, cannot be erased. Long after the Noblewoman's life had been reshaped by scandal, letters, rumors, and fragments of memory continued to surface, piecing together a story that history both preserved and obscured. Scholars and storytellers alike have attempted to reconstruct the events of her life, but the surviving documents are fragmentary, often contradictory, and shrouded in the intentional silences of those who sought to protect their reputations. Handwritten letters, once exchanged with her lover, hint at an intimacy that words alone cannot fully capture. Some were discovered decades later in private archives, Their ink faded and pages brittle, yet the emotions they convey remain vivid. Passion, longing, fear, and a desperate attempt to communicate what society forbade her to express aloud. These letters serve as windows into a world hidden behind closed doors, providing glimpses of a life shaped as much by secrecy as by desire. Rumors, too, played a significant role in preserving her story, though in ways that were often distorted, sensationalized, or biased by the perspective of the teller. In aristocratic salons, servants' quarters, and crowded public spaces, whispered accounts of the affair and subsequent murder became exaggerated with each retelling. Some claimed she acted out of pure jealousy. Others suggested political motivations or long-standing family vendettas. Over time, these rumors coalesced into a complex mythos surrounding her character. The passionate noblewoman, the cunning murderer, the tragic figure ensnared by her own desires. The audience is drawn into the challenge of separating fact from fiction, understanding how human memory, societal bias, and the allure of scandal shape historical narratives. Each version of the story reveals as much about the observers as it does about the woman herself. The surviving letters also offer insight into the noblewoman's inner life, revealing a depth of emotional intelligence and psychological complexity that official records seldom acknowledge. They expose her self-awareness, her understanding of social dynamics, and her calculated navigation of risk. She was acutely aware that discovery could ruin not only herself but also her family, and yet she pursued her desires with determination and cunning. The tension between her private aspirations and the rigid expectations of Neapolitan society is evident in the language of her correspondence, reflecting both longing and fear, passion and prudence. For the audience, these letters serve as a bridge between historical fact and human experience, illustrating the timeless struggle between societal constraint and personal desire. Historical investigation into the case reveals another layer of mystery. Official documents, trial records, and family archives often provide only skeletal outlines, leaving vast gaps in understanding. Scholars have debated inconsistencies, why certain witnesses' testimonies were excluded, why specific letters disappeared, and whether some events were deliberately misrepresented to protect the family name. These gaps create space for interpretation, speculation, and a lingering sense of intrigue. The noblewoman's story thus exists in two parallel forms: the documented legal and social record, and the private, often contradictory narrative preserved through rumor, letters, and anecdotal memory. This duality reinforces the allure of her tale, keeping the audience engaged in the process of discovery and conjecture. Some historians argue that the incomplete nature of the records is itself a reflection of the societal constraints of the time. Women, particularly noblewomen, had their voices deliberately muted. Their experiences were filtered through the lenses of male relatives, legal authorities, or social commentators. Letters, diaries, and personal notes, when preserved, were often hidden or destroyed to maintain appearances. The noblewoman's story exemplifies this tension between visibility and invisibility, public accountability and private existence. The audience is encouraged to consider not only the known events, but also the silences and absences, recognizing that what is left unsaid can be as telling as what is documented. The allure of mystery surrounding the noblewoman has only grown with time. Writers, dramatists, and historians have reconstructed her narrative in novels, essays, and documentaries, blending fact with interpretation to highlight the psychological and social complexities of her life. Each retelling emphasizes different facets. Some focus on the scandal, others on the romance, and still others on the historical and social implications of her actions. The story resonates across centuries because it touches on universal themes: the conflict between desire and duty, the consequences of secrecy, and the enduring fascination with human transgression. Her life is both a historical case study and a timeless narrative of passion, fear, and intrigue. Ultimately, the legacy of her secrets is inseparable from the story itself. The letters, rumors, and historical mysteries ensure that her tale remains alive, continually rediscovered and reinterpreted. The audience is left to navigate the interplay between fact and legend, understanding that while some details may never be fully verified, the emotional truth of her experiences, the tension, the longing, the peril, remains compelling. Her story serves as a reminder that history is not only what is recorded, but also what is remembered, imagined, and speculated upon. The noblewoman's life, her forbidden affair, and the murder she committed continue to captivate, proving that some shadows cast by desire and secrecy endure far beyond the moment of their creation. By the end of this section, the audience is left with a lingering sense of intrigue and reflection. The noblewoman's actions, her carefully concealed desires, and the mystery that surrounds her life are both a window into the past and a commentary on human nature. Her story transcends the specifics of Naples in the 18th century, becoming a timeless exploration of passion, secrecy, and the enduring fascination of the untold, the hidden, and the morally complex. The audience is left pondering the thin line between legend and history, understanding that the allure of a forbidden story is often amplified by the very gaps that time and society have left behind.